Hello there, book friends, and welcome to my channel. My name is Megan, and today I am doing my April wrap-up. And in the month of April, in total, I read 5 books and I read 3 comics. So I didn't end up reading as much as I usually do during the month, but 5 books was pretty good. And all the books I read this month, I have to say, were 4 stars or more, except for some of the comics. So I had a really great reading month, and I loved pretty much all the books that I read. So I'm going to tell you about my favorite ones and some of the ones that were like not quite up there but still pretty good. And yeah, let's get into all the books that I read for the month of April. Be prepared for some fangirling because I read some pretty good books. So the first book that I read this month was When Dimple Met Rishi by Rochelle Mead, I believe. I don't have the book with me, so I'll put the name up here if I'm wrong. I borrowed it from the library, and this is a cute contemporary novel with 2 Indian main characters living in America. It was one of the most adorable things that I read this month. I had a lot of fun with this book. It was just so cute, and it did deal with a few heavier topics like some minor racism and sexism and issues that young people face today. I just love the way that it brought them up. It wasn't the main focus of the book. The main plot of this book is it's a romance pretty much, and we have our main couple. We have both Dimple and Rishi, and Dimple is an aspiring web designer. She is very passionate about web designing and she wants to build her own business, I believe. And she is just very passionate, and I love that about her. I love seeing characters who are passionate about something, that have a drive and want to do something with their life. It's really nice to see characters like that. And then we have Rishi, and he is so adorable, and he is like this most hopeless romantic, but he also does have some of his own interests. He loves drawing and drawing comics. That's something that he likes to do, but not something that he wants to go into for his future because he doesn't think that he can make a career in that, so he wants to go into what his parents want him to do, which I think is becoming a lawyer. I can't remember. It's been like 3 weeks since I read the book, and I read a few books after, so my mind is kind of blurry on the exact details. But he's gonna pretty much go into what his parents want him to go because he's the good boy of the family, and he also has a younger brother, and so there's a little bit of sibling rivalry and some sibling relationships that we get to see in this book, and I love seeing family relationships in books because that's something that I love to read about. So back to Dimple. She wants to be a web designer, right? And so she ends up going to this summer program, and Rishi ends up going there as well because his parents want him to meet Dimple, and hopefully they can have an arranged marriage, or sort of. That's what they're wanting, and Dimple doesn't know anything about this, so there we have our story. And I love this book. I had a few issues with it. Dimple's character got kind of annoying towards the middle and the end. She was a bit wishy-washy, and I found that a little bit annoying at times, and I can't really say anything else without giving away spoilers, but overall the book was like a cute, fun, contemporary romance that I really enjoyed reading and would read again in the future. I believe I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It wasn't perfect, but I overall had a lot of fun with it and would recommend it if you're interested. And the next book that I tried to read was The Reader, and I can't remember the author for this one, but it was a library book that I took out, and I ended up DNFing it at like 60-80 pages. It was really slow, and I just couldn't get into it, and I had to return it to the library, and I don't know if I'm going to give it another chance. Probably not, because I have so many other books that sound and look a lot more my speed in reading taste, and this one, it sounded like it could have been a good read, but it didn't grab my attention, and I can't really say much more than that because I only got like 80 pages in before I DNF'd it, and this was the only book that I DNF'd this month. So yeah, that was my only disappointment for the month of April. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that book. We're going to go on to the next book that I read that I absolutely loved. That is Wonder Woman by Leigh Bardugo, and I have seen this around BookTube a lot, and it's fairly a new release. I'm not exactly sure how long it's been out for, but maybe 5 months. And I borrowed this one from the library originally, and then I fell in love with it. I fell so hard in love with this book, so I picked up myself a copy because it is gorgeous. And let's look at this. I'm going to show you something. At the back of the book, I love when books have these fun little trinkets in them. And if you have this book, you know what I'm talking about. But here we have this poster of Diana or Wonder Woman, and you can rip it out if you want to. I haven't. I'm gonna leave it in there for now. I don't know if I will hang it up on my wall. I don't know about space right now, but that's just gorgeous. And all the books in the DC universe in the DC universe that are being written by popular YA authors right now have these kind of fun little posters at the back of them, and I love it. It's so adorable. It makes it more worthwhile to actually pick up your own copy because you get fun little trinkets like that in books. I love it so much. Besides that, I am not the biggest fan of Leigh Bardugo. I haven't really liked any of her other books as much. The Six of Crows duology was okay. I haven't read the second book. I liked the first book was okay. It just wasn't quite my speed. So I might talk about those books in a later video if you want. But this book I adored. Oh my gosh. The way that she wrote Diana was perfect. There wasn't a lot of romance in this book. It was more geared towards friendships and sisterhood, and it was beautiful. So in this book, we start off with Diana on the island of Niskira with her mother and the other Amazon warriors that live there. We start off with Diana in a race that she has been training for months, and she has been pretty excited about, and she wants to win, but there is a storm, and she, instead of winning the race, she goes and she saves a young woman who has fallen off a boat. That's pretty much where her story starts off. I don't want to say anything else without spoiling you guys, really, but she ends up going on a quest-like adventure with the young woman and other characters that they meet, and it's a young group of people going on an adventure-like quest. Kind of had an almost Percy Jackson-esque feel, but a little bit more adult. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but I loved the adventure that they went on, and the character that was in this book was so great. And again, there really was not a lot of romance. There was a little bit, but it definitely did not dominate the story, and I love to see female superheroes in books and even in movies and TV shows where it isn't all about romance. It can be there, but I just don't want to see it dominating the story all the time, because women don't need to have a man by their side to be awesome, okay? That Hollywood, get it together. Also, the villain in the story, spot on. I loved it, and I loved the way it ended, and the twist at the ending was beautiful. And it almost felt like a movie at times. I loved the action scenes in this book. It was great. It would have been cool to have seen a little bit more action, but overall, this book was just so much fun. And if you are a fan of superheroes, definitely pick this up because it was so good. If you want to see me do a spoiler review, let me know down below because I would love to actually talk about this book some more. The other book that I read in the month of April is Tempest and Slaughter by Tamora Pierce. And also, in this book, wait for it, we have ourselves a little poster at the end that says, "Without reading, we are all without light in the dark, without fire in the cold." Isn't that great? That's such a great saying. If you don't know anything about this book, it's been around BookTube a little bit. Tamora Pierce, she hasn't been talked about on BookTube a lot, but she wrote a lot of books in the 80s and the 90s, and even recently she has this whole Tortel series, and this is a new book in her Tortel world, and I had a lot of fun with this. In this one, we follow Aram Draper, who, if you've read the Dane Chronicles, is new mayor, and we follow him as a young boy, and we get to see where he grew up and his life. So this is kind of like an origin story to the character that we met in the Dane Chronicles. If you don't know anything about that, it's a really good series, but this one we follow Aram and his two friends, Orzone and Varese, on their school adventures and what happens to them when they're young. This book starts out with Aram as 10, and I believe ends with him at like 14, 15, and I believe the series is going to be a duology, so there will be one more book in this series, and I'm excited to see that book. I enjoyed this one. I just felt as if it did get a little bit slow, and it didn't need to be quite as long as it was. It's 460 pages, and it didn't really need to be that big. They could have taken away at least like 100 pages and out some of the school stuff. At least that's what I felt. Overall, I still did enjoy reading it because I got to see some of the characters that I haven't seen in a while, and we had some of the characters that are in the Dane Chronicles appear in this one as well. And it's been a while since I've read the Dane Chronicles, so I was trying to pinpoint, like, wait, I know that name. I just can't quite remember who he is or what he did in the other books. So I think it would have been nice to have reread the Dane Chronicles before I read this book, and that might have made my experience a little bit more enjoyable. But overall, I did enjoy getting to see the characters and the magic in this world, and we got to learn more about young Numair, or Aram, as he is called in this book. And I just loved seeing his magic and what it was like to grow up in the world that he was growing up. And it did definitely pick up more at the end, near the end of the book, and we got to see the character's growth and Orzone's change as well. He hasn't fully gone over to the dark side yet, but we know that will happen. But overall, I definitely enjoyed it. Just felt like it could have been a little bit on the shorter side and the pacing could have been picked up a bit. And I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars because of some of the issues that I had with it. The next book that I read that I don't currently have is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. And I don't even really think I need to tell you what this book is about because it has been all over BookTube. With this one, the hype is real. And for me, it is not undeserving of that hype. This was a freaking fantastic book. I loved it. I have definitely boarded the hype train for this one. All aboard, choo-choo! I am a huge fan of books with fae or fairies in them, and this one, it did them justice. So, a brief description of this book, if you don't know what it's about. Pretty much we have this fairy lord, and he goes to Earth to get his daughter from his human wife who stole her away, and his ex-human wife had married and had 2 human children who are twins, and so you have 3 girls, and the fairy lord comes and he kills them, and he kills them dead. He kills the parents of the 3 girls, and then he takes them under his wing. He takes his daughter, and he takes the twins as well, and raises them under his wing in fairy. Then we flash forward to years later when they are all older adults, 17, like 16, 17, 18, and they are living in fairy with their father and their stepmother. And in this book we follow the character Jude, who is one of the twins, so she is a full-on mortal. She doesn't have any fae powers. And then we have her twin sister Taryn and her half-sister Vivian. In this book we see everything from her point of view, and I loved her character. She was so incredibly flawed and power-hungry, but also she had some sort of morality. And I love seeing that in a character. And I feel like I love a lot of the other characters in this book. There's definitely a few characters that I didn't really click with. But for the most part, I loved all of the characters, and I do realize that there are a few problematic issues with this book, but that didn't take away my enjoyment from it at all. I still loved it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because there was so much that happened that just gripped me, and the writing was superb, and the characters were so flawed, but still, I found myself rooting for them, and I found myself wanting good things to happen, and there was a twist at the end that I did not see coming. I felt like I should have seen that coming, but I didn't, and it blew my mind, and I was just blown away by this book, and I would definitely recommend it. And we're going to go on to the next book that I read, which was Wonder by R.J. Paricio. And I had seen the movie before I read the book, and I loved the movie. I thought they did a fantastic job, and this book was just fantastic as well as the other books. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The writing was great, and I love the story. If you don't know, if you haven't heard, Wonder is about a boy named Augie who has a face deformity because he was just born differently, and then he had to go through several surgeries in his life. I think he was missing part of his chin at one point, and he had to eat through a straw for the first bit of his life. And he's had lots of issues like that, and I felt for him, but he was such a great character. He was sad at times, but also trying to be optimistic, and his humor, slightly self-deprecating at times, but still on point and made me laugh. I just loved him, and the main plot of this book is that Augie is 10 years old, and he's finally going to a regular public school. He's been homeschooled for most of his life, but his mother really wants him to go to school. She doesn't really think that there's anything else that she can really teach him, and she wants him to get a better education, so she's putting him in regular school, and he is obviously very nervous about that. He hasn't had a ton of friends in his life because of the fact that he looks different and because of the fact that he was homeschooled. And we go through him being introduced to some of the kids at school who show him around, and we see him be bullied, we see him make friends, and we see him just go through this transformation, and it was a really beautiful story. And another thing that I liked is that we see other people's point of views throughout the story. We see his sister Viola's, and we see her friend's point of view, and Viola's boyfriend at a point, and we even see some of Augie's friend, and it was really nice to see what other people were thinking and what was going on in their heads, and it helped us to better feel for their characters and to understand what was going on in their life. Overall, this was just really well written. The story was great. I was never bored, and the pacing was fantastic, but the ending of the book was well done, and it made me have all sorts of warm and fuzzies, and overall I love this book and I would definitely recommend it if you want to read it. That's all I'm going to say about that book. And then I'm just going to briefly talk some of the comics I read this month. I read 3 Miles Morales comics, and one of them was a Spider-Gwen. I borrowed these from the library. I'm pretty sure I read them in the right order, but I was a little confused at times because there was a ton of superheroes and supervillains, and I didn't even know all of them. They were kind of obscure supervillains and superheroes. The story wasn't the greatest for this comic, and I don't take my comic books too seriously. I don't read a lot of comic books, but recently I have been trying to get into a few more and checking out and trying to figure out like what kind of stories I like in comics, and they've just kind of been fun books with pictures and some cool fight scenes and maybe some fun one-liners. I haven't really found myself like immensely in love with any of the comics that I have read so far. I've just enjoyed them. They're just kind of fun to read, and they're not insanely special to me. I do love superheroes though, and I love the whole MCU universe, and a lot of novels do with superheroes, but comic books aren't really my thing. So if you're new to my channel, I don't really read a lot of comic books. I was just trying some new stuff out, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about who Miles Morales is, because I think there's a movie coming out with him in it, an animated Spider-Man movie coming out with him in it. If you don't know, he's the Black Spider-Man in this universe where Peter Parker is older. So you meet Peter Parker and he's an older dude. Not old, but he's like in his mid-30s or late 30s or something like that. I don't know exactly. We only see him for a few minutes in the comic. Overall, it was fun, and I enjoyed learning more about Miles Morales' life. I was hoping for a little bit more of a good story and a little bit more of a good lesson from this book. I feel like a lot of comic books, and they expect me to know all this stuff as if I've been reading comic books my whole life, and I haven't, so I'm awfully confused at points. But that's all I'm going to say about those books. That has been all the books that I have read for the month of April, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have read any of these books that I've talked about, or if you're interested in them, let me know down below in the comments and we can discuss them more, because I read a lot of great books this month. It was a really great reading month for me, and I read some pretty hype books, and I'd say for the most part, most of them were really deserving of the hype. And that's all for this video, so thank you for watching, and give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe down to my channel below if you want more bookish content from me. And that's all for now. Bye!